It has been exactly 3 days since the sky above the Crimson Citadel was a bruised, oily purple. 3 days since I took the crushing weight of the Star-Seers ritual into my own soul. 3 days since Caelum used his power to heal the hollow echoes of my sister and father, breaking the anchors and causing the iron cloud to shatter like glass. I woke up today, and for the first time in months, the weight of Valerian's arm across my chest didn't feel like a comfort. It felt like an anchor I wasn't strong enough to lift. I tried to sit up, and the world tilted. My heart didn't just beat, it stumbled. I am the bridge. But the mechanical rhythm that keeps the path open is failing. I looked at Valerian. He was awake. He didn't move, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. He was listening to my stumbled heartbeat. "It's not settling, Julian," he whispered. His voice was raw, a sound he only made when he was truly afraid. "I'm just tired, Valerian," I lied. "You are not tired. You are damaged." He sat up, his cold hand pressing against my sternum. I flinched. The heat of the bond felt different now. It didn't feel like warmth. It felt like fire on a fresh burn. The star iron in that blade, it wasn't meant for human blood. It drank from you. And I let it happen not once, but twice. I took his hand and pulled it away. I chose it. I'd choose it 1,000 times to keep Caelum safe. But as I stood up, my knees buckled. I had to grab the edge of the bed to keep from falling. I saw the look on Valerian's face. The look of a king who had just realized his most precious kingdom was built on shifting sand. The Citadel has changed. It isn't just me that's broken. It's the very logic of the fortress. As I walked through the corridors toward the solar, I noticed the cracks. Fine. Spiderweb fractures were spreading through the black marble walls as if the mountain itself were shrinking. The stones were groaning, a low-frequency hum that seemed to follow Caelum wherever he went. I reached out to steady myself, and the wards that once barred me, the ancient vampire magic that should have rejected my humanity, didn't pulse. They didn't even hum. They recognized the bridge. They recognized me, even as I failed, and the shadows on the walls seemed to bow as I passed. I passed a set of heavy iron doors that led to the east wing. I watched a guard try to open them, his keys turning in the lock, but the doors didn't budge. Then Caelum walked past us, his mind clearly miles away, and the doors swung open silently before he even reached them. They didn't respond to the king's keys anymore. They responded to the prince's pulse. The Citadel is no longer a fortress. It's a containment chamber. It's reacting to the Daywalker, bending its ancient laws around a child who was never meant to exist. I reached the battlements and looked out. The silence from the outside world was louder than any war cry. In just 3 days, the world had begun to withdraw. The border outposts had gone silent. Even the advanced trade caravans, those that lived for profit regardless of politics, had stopped at the horizon, refusing to cross into our lands. The world is choosing sides. They saw the eclipse. I found Caelum in the garden. He was standing perfectly still over the shattered ruins of the stone fountain he had destroyed during his surge. "Caelum?" I called out. He didn't turn. He didn't run to me. His gold eye was dim, almost amber. "I fixed them, Papa," he whispered. He was talking about Elena and my father. They were still in the infirmary, sleeping a deep, dreamless sleep. But they don't feel right. When I touched them, I felt their rooms. They were so empty. I tried to fill them with my light, but I think I just made them into mirrors. "You saved their lives, Caelum," I said, stepping closer. He flinched away from my hand. It was a small movement, but it felt like a dagger in my gut. "Every time I use it, something breaks," Caelum said, his voice trembling. "I broke the fountain. I broke the sky. And I broke you, Papa. I can hear your heart. It sounds like a bird with a broken wing." He looked at his hands, then tucked them into his sleeves, as if he were trying to hide a weapon. "If I stop listening to the light, it can't hurt anyone anymore," he whispered. "I'm going to be quiet now, I promise." "Caelum, no. I'm going to be quiet," he repeated, his eyes filling with a terrifying adult resolve. I watched him walk away, his light fading until he was just a shadow against the gray stone. He is self-suppressing. He is trying to bury a son. And I know, deep in my soul, that a sun buried under compression only results in an explosion. That night, the war room was a tomb. Valerian stood over the map. He didn't look at me when I entered. "He refused his lessons today," Valerian said. His voice was a cold, hard line. "He sat in the dark and refused to call even a spark. He's afraid, Julian." "He has every right to be afraid," I snapped, leaning against the table to hide the tremor in my legs. "He's a child who was just used as a battery by his own grandfather. He needs time." "We don't have time." Valerian slammed his hand on the map. The stone table cracked under his palm. "The Eclipse Order is regrouping. The travelers from the fading realm didn't leave. They are merely waiting for the next rift. Caelum must be trained. He must learn to turn that fear into a blade. Mercy without strength is just a slow suicide." "He is not a blade, Valerian. He is our son." I walked around the table, forcing him to look at me. "The moment we start shaping him into a weapon, we become no better than the people who tried to harvest him. We are supposed to be his sanctuary, not his drill sergeants." "Sanctuary is a luxury for the powerless," Valerian hissed. He stepped into my space, his crimson eyes burning. "I have lived 500 years, Julian. I have seen what happens to miracles that cannot defend themselves. They become trophies. I will not see him mounted on a wall. And I will not see his soul extinguished because you're too afraid to let him be human." We stared at each other. This was the first true fracture. Not a fight about the council or the treaty, but a fight about the very essence of our son. Valerian saw a king who needed to be forged. I saw a boy who needed to be loved. Whether Valerian had known the cost I was paying for this bond, or whether love had blinded him to the damage, the result was the same. We were the only two people who could protect him, and we couldn't even agree on what protection meant. I couldn't sleep. The skipping in my heart was getting louder, a rhythmic drumming in my ears that made the room feel small. I found myself in the deepest part of the Citadel's archives, the place where the old pacts were kept. The wards no longer barred me. They yielded to what I had become, welcoming me even as my body failed. I searched through the scrolls of the First Age, looking for anything on the Daywalker. I didn't find a prophecy. I found a blueprint. I read the words, and the air left my lungs. The bridge was never just a title. It was a component. The ancient texts described the union of a high vampire and a mortal vessel not as a marriage, but as a circuit. The mortal soul, the bridge, was designed to be a buffer. It was meant to absorb the recoil of the Daywalker's power so the world didn't burn. But the text was clear. The bridge is a finite resource. It is consumed by the heat it carries. With every surge, the stones of the bridge turn to ash until the path is gone. My heart skipped again, a sharp, stabbing pain. I realized then that I wasn't just tired. I was being used up. Every time I reached out to Caelum to ground his power, every time I channeled Valerian to save our lives, I was burning a piece of my own soul to pay the toll. The bridge was never meant to survive the Daywalker's full awakening. I am the fuse that is meant to burn out so the star can shine. I sat in the dark, the scroll trembling in my hands. I wondered if Valerian knew. I wondered if he had always seen me as a candle meant to be spent. No. I looked at the dark veins in my hands. It doesn't matter if he knew. I know. And I know that the more Caelum learns to rely on me, the faster I will vanish. I walked back to Caelum's room. He was sitting on the edge of his fur-lined bed. "Papa," he whispered. "I'm here, Caelum." I sat beside him, trying to keep my breathing steady. "You don't have to be quiet. The light is part of you. It's okay to let it out." Caelum turned to me. His gold eye was bright for a second, then it flickered. He reached out and touched my chest, right over my struggling heart. I felt a tiny pulse of warmth. He was trying to heal the gear. But as he touched me, I gasped. The sensation was like a bolt of lightning hitting a raw nerve. My heart gave a violent, panicked leap, and I had to double over, clutching my chest as a coughing fit seized me. When I pulled my hand away from my mouth, there was a faint smear of gold-flecked blood on my palm. Caelum saw it. The look on his face wasn't fear. It was a profound, devastating realization. He saw the cracks in the bridge. He saw the ash I was becoming. "I'm okay," I wheezed, trying to hide my hand. "It's just the cold." Caelum didn't say anything. He pulled his hand back and tucked it into his tunic. He looked at me with eyes that were no longer a child's. He had sensed the future, but he had misread it. He didn't see a choice between power and restraint. He saw a choice between his existence and mine. "Go to sleep, Papa," he said softly. I kissed his forehead and left the room, my legs feeling like lead. "Next time I won't reach for you, Papa. I'll become the dark. I'll become whatever I have to be. But I won't let you burn for me again." The silence that followed Caelum's vow was heavier than any scream. I walked back to my chambers, the stone floor feeling like it was made of water beneath my boots. Every time my heart skipped a beat, a cold, numbing sensation washed over my skin, leaving me breathless. I reached my room and finally did what I'd been avoiding for days. I stood in front of the tall obsidian mirror and stripped away my silk tunic. I gasped at my own reflection. I didn't recognize the man staring back. My skin, usually flush with the warmth of the living, was becoming the color of parchment. But it was the veins that terrified me. Starting from the center of my chest, right where the blood bond anchored itself to my heart, dark, jagged lines were spreading. They looked like the roots of a dead tree, crawling up my neck and down toward my ribs. They pulsed with a faint violet light, the mark of ether overflow. I was becoming a map of my son's power. I was a vessel that had been filled with too much light, and now the clay was beginning to shatter. I heard the door click. I didn't turn around. I knew the scent of winter rain and ancient dust. Valerian stood in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the dark roots in my mirror. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He looked like a man watching his world burn and realizing he had no water to put it out. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Since the moment you lifted that sword," Valerian rasped. He walked over, his cold fingers tracing the dark lines on my shoulder. I shivered, but the touch didn't bring the warmth it used to. I thought my blood could offset the decay. I thought if I gave you enough of my immortality, the bridge would hold. "You lied to me," I said, finally turning to face him. My eyes were stinging. "You knew I was a fuse. You knew that every time I grounded his power, I was burning away." "I was desperate." Valerian's voice cracked, the first time I'd ever heard the Vampire King lose his composure. He gripped my arms, his eyes a solid, bleeding crimson. "I waited 500 years for you. Do you think I care about the Daywalker? Do you think I care about a prophecy? I wanted a mate. I wanted a life. I didn't want a sacrifice." We stood there, the distance between us growing even as he held me. This was the fracture. The trust that had built our family was crumbling under the weight of the truth. I looked at the man I loved. the monster who had claimed me. And for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I couldn't stay in that room. I dressed quickly and fled to the infirmary, my heart stumbling in my chest like a trapped bird. My sister, Elena, was awake. She was sitting up in bed, her face gaunt, her blue eyes wide and vacant. She looked at me as I entered, and for a second, a flicker of the old Elena returned, the girl who used to laugh while I carried her bags, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "He gave it to them, Julian," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "He didn't just give them a path, he gave them the key." I sat on the edge of her bed, taking her cold hand. "Who, Elena? What did Father do?" "He gave the High Alchemist his blood," she wheezed, a tear of silver alchemical oil tracking down her cheek. "They didn't need an army to break the gates. They were never planning to scale the walls. They are using the family tether. They are tuning their ritual to Caelum's frequency, like a bell being struck at just the right note. They are going to vibrate his soul until it shatters, and then they will pull the pieces through the bond." I felt a wave of icy terror. The Eclipse Order wasn't an army. It was a parasite. They were using the very thing that made us family, our blood, to bypass every defense Valerian had built. "They're calling him," Elena whispered, her eyes rolling back. "They're calling the star home." I ran from the infirmary, my lungs burning. I had to find him. I had to stop him from listening. I found Caelum on the high balcony of the library, the very place where he had made the compass scream. He was standing at the edge of the stone railing, staring out at the southern horizon. The sky was no longer blue. It was a deep, bruised indigo, even though it was midday. "Caelum!" I shouted, reaching for him. He didn't turn. He was perfectly still, his small hands gripped so tight on the railing that the stone was beginning to smoke. "Do you hear it, Papa?" he asked. His voice was different. It was cold. It lacked the innocence of the boy who wanted to heal roses. "The man in the stars is singing. He says the sun is lonely. He says that if I go to them, you won't have to break anymore. He says the bridge can finally rest." "It's a lie, Caelum!" I grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. "They don't want to save me. They want to harvest you. They will turn you into an engine for their dying world." "I know," Caelum said. He looked at me with a devastating maturity, his gold eye bright and his crimson eye pulsing like a warning light. "But if I stay here, I kill you. I can feel the stones of your soul turning to ash every time I breathe. I can see the roots in your neck, Julian. I am the rot that is eating you. No, Caelum, listen to me. I'm not a boy anymore, Papa," he interrupted, his voice echoing with the power of a king. "I am a Daywalker, and I've made my choice." Suddenly, the air around us began to hum. It was the frequency Elena had warned me about, a high-pitched metallic ringing that vibrated in my marrow. Caelum gasped, his back arching as if an invisible hook had caught him in the chest. "They're pulling!" he shrieked. Through the bond, I felt the attack. It wasn't physical. It was a psychic tide, a violent suction coming from the south. The Eclipse Order was reaching through the family bloodline, trying to drag Caelum out of his own skin. I couldn't hold him. The vibration was so intense it threw me backward, slamming me against the library door. I watched as Caelum began to glow, not with gold, but with a terrifying, sickly violet light, the same light I had seen in my father's chest. "Valerian!" I screamed into our mental tether. Valerian arrived not through the door, but through the shadows. He lunged for Caelum, but the moment his fingers touched our son's skin, a shockwave of alchemical energy blasted outward. Valerian was thrown across the room, his silver hair scorched. "It's a resonance lock," Valerian shouted, struggling to his feet. "We can't touch him without grounding the ritual. Julian, the archives. There has to be a way to sever the frequency." I didn't wait. I ignored the agonizing skip in my heart and sprinted toward the restricted archives. I dived into the stacks, throwing scrolls and books aside until I found it. The blueprint I had seen before. The vessel and the vault. I read the hidden text, the words blurred by my own tears. To save the core from the external pull, the bridge must become the void. The mortal vessel must sever the resonance by sacrificing the very thing the ritual seeks. The blood bond. My heart stopped. Not physically yet, but spiritually. Not a skip, a total stop. The ritual was seeking Caelum because his frequency was tied to mine and Valerian's. If I severed the bond, if I broke the tether that made us a family, the Star-Seers would lose their grip. But if I broke the bond, I would lose the only thing keeping me alive. I would no longer be the bridge. I would just be a human with a failing heart and a body full of ether rot. I looked at the dark veins in my hands. I'm the fuse, I whispered to the empty room. I was always the fuse. I ran back to the balcony. The scene was a nightmare. The citadel was shaking so violently that stones were falling from the ceiling. Caelum was levitating in the center of a violet whirlwind, his eyes rolled back in his head. Valerian was fighting a losing battle, trying to use his own dark magic to create a shield, but the iron cloud, the massive alchemical cloud in the sky, was draining him faster than he could replenish. The Star-Seers were winning. The man in the stars was laughing through the rift. I stepped into the whirlwind. The pressure was like being crushed between two tectonic plates. My heart was a frantic, dying drum. Caelum, I roared, my voice amplified by the last of the bond's light. Caelum's eyes snapped open. He looked at me, and I saw the terror there. He was losing himself. The hollow was claiming him. Next time I won't reach for you, Papa, he whispered, repeating his vow from the night before. I'll become the dark. I'll become whatever I have to be to keep you whole. No, Caelum. I reached out, my fingers inches from his glowing chest. Don't become the dark. I'm the bridge. I'm the one who decides when it falls. I looked back at Valerian. He saw the look in my eyes. He knew what I was about to do. Julian, no, he screamed, lunging forward. We can find another way. There is no other way, Valerian, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. Keep him safe. Teach him to be the dawn. I reached into my own chest, not with my hands, but with my soul. I grabbed the golden tether of the blood bond, the thing that made me a king's mate and a god's father. And I pulled. A sound tore through the citadel, not a scream, but a snap. Like a violin string breaking in a quiet room, the violet whirlwind vanished. Caelum fell from the air, his gold eye returning to its natural brilliance. The sky above us turned from bruised purple to a deathly hollow gray. The Star-Seers lost their grip. The frequency was dead. But as I fell to my knees, the white light in my eyes extinguished. I felt the heat leave my body. The dark veins in my neck began to turn black, turning to actual ash under my skin. My heart gave one final heavy thud. And then there was nothing. The last thing I heard was Valerian's roar of grief and Caelum's scream as he realized that the bridge hadn't just fallen. The bridge was gone. And in the south, the High Alchemist smiled. The ritual hadn't taken the boy, but it had taken the only thing protecting him. The long night had finally arrived. They say that when you die, the world doesn't go dark, it goes gray. I was standing on a shore of ash, looking out at an ocean of smoke. There was no sound here, no skipping heart, no grinding gears, no hum of the blood bond. I had snapped it with my own hands. I had severed the frequency that made me a husband and a father to save my son from the Star-Seers, and in doing so, I had cast myself into the void between worlds. I looked down at my hands. They were translucent, like frosted glass. The dark roots of the ether rot were gone, but so was my warmth. I was a ghost in the machine. But then, I felt it. A vibration. It wasn't in my chest, it was in the air itself. Even here, in the silence of death, I could hear him. I could hear Caelum. It wasn't a voice. It was a scream of such pure, unadulterated grief that it rippled through the gray ocean, turning the smoke into fire. He was calling for me. He was reaching for a bridge that no longer existed, his small hands clawing at the empty space where my soul used to be. And then I heard Valerian. His roar of agony was lower, a tectonic shift that shook the very foundations of the limbo I stood in. He wasn't just grieving a mate. He was a king who had lost his anchor. Without me to ground him, Valerian's ancient darkness was beginning to bleed out, uncontrolled and lethal. I realized then that my sacrifice hadn't just saved Caelum from the Star-Seers. It had unleashed something much worse. I had removed the only thing keeping the Vampire King and the Daywalker Prince from becoming the very monsters the world feared. I closed my eyes and pressed my hands to the ashen ground. I'm still here, I whispered to the gray silence. I am the bridge, and the bridge does not fall. The gray world flickered. Suddenly, I wasn't just on the shore. I was a passenger in my own body, looking through the veil. The Crimson Citadel was screaming. The High Alchemist had finally arrived. He had used the moment the bond snapped, the moment of my death, to breach the final wards. The black stones of the castle were turning to purple mist, dissolving under the weight of a ritual that was no longer seeking a frequency, but was now simply eating reality. I saw Valerian in the Great Hall. He was a nightmare. His silver hair was stained with black blood, his eyes two pits of abyssal shadow. He wasn't using a sword anymore. He was a hurricane of necrotic energy, tearing through the Sun Eater warriors as if they were made of paper. But he was losing his mind. He was laughing, a hollow, terrifying sound. He had given up on survival. He was just waiting to burn the world down before he joined me in the dark. And Caelum, my beautiful boy. He was standing on the high dais of the throne room, his body vibrating with a light so intense it was blinding. He wasn't the child I knew anymore. The grief had triggered a final violent surge of growth. He stood as a young man now, his silver-brown hair whipping in an alchemical gale. "Papa is gone," Caelum shrieked, and the sound shattered the remaining stained glass windows. "You took him. You made him break." He was looking at my father. The King of the South walked through the purple mist, his body glowing with that sickly violet flame. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a hollowed-out suit of armor for the High Alchemist. He smiled at Caelum, a look of predatory triumph. He was a fuse boy. My father's voice boomed, amplified by 1,000 dead souls. He did his job. He burned out so you could be harvested. Now come to the altar. Let your light serve a real empire. Caelum didn't move toward the altar. He moved toward the dark. I promised him, Caelum whispered, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register that made even the alchemist pause. I told him that next time, I wouldn't reach for him. I told him I would become the dark. I would be whatever I had to be to keep him whole. Caelum raised his hands. The golden light in his right eye began to bleed into the crimson of his left. The two colors didn't mix. They fought, creating a swirling vortex of black and gold fire in his palms. "Caelum, no!" Valerian shouted from the floor of the hall, momentarily regaining his senses. "That is the void flare. If you release that, you won't just kill the alchemist, you'll extinguish the sun itself." Caelum didn't listen. He couldn't. He was lost in the logic of a god who had lost his heart. He was going to wipe out the Eclipse Order, the Citadel, and the entire northern continent to avenge me. From the gray limbo, I screamed. I threw myself against the veil between life and death. I didn't have a body, but I had a memory. I had the feeling of the obsidian hilt in my palm. I had the feeling of Valerian's lips against mine. I realized that the High Alchemist was wrong. I wasn't just a fuse. A fuse is a part of a machine that is meant to be replaced. I am a bridge. And a bridge is built to withstand the storm. I reached out through the echoes of the broken bond. I didn't try to pull myself back to life. I tried to pull Caelum back to me. The alchemist realized what was happening. He saw the black and gold fire growing in Caelum's hands and panicked. "Kill the king!" the alchemist roared. The Sun-Eater warriors, sensing their master's fear, dived for Valerian. My husband fought bravely, his obsidian blade singing a song of slaughter, but he was exhausted. A soul-iron spear pierced his shoulder, pinning him to the obsidian throne. He groaned, his silver hair falling over his face as he looked up at Caelum. "Do it, son," Valerian wheezed, blood trickling from his mouth. "Burn it all. Let us find your father in the ash." The alchemist laughed, stepping toward Caelum. He raised a hand, a stream of violet fire shooting toward my son's chest. "If you won't be a core, you will be a corpse." The violet fire hit Caelum, but he didn't flinch. He absorbed it. He was a Daywalker. He was the ultimate vessel. He took the alchemist's hate, he took Valerian's despair, and he took my death. And he compressed it all into a single point of infinite gravity. The room went silent. The purple mist stopped moving. Caelum was about to detonate. I felt the moment it began. The first spark of the void flare. It was going to tear the fabric of reality apart. I didn't think about the logic. I didn't think about the archives. I simply reached through the gray ocean and grabbed the frequency of my own love. I turned my soul into a needle and threaded it through the eye of the storm. I appeared in the room, not as a man, but as a shimmer of white light. A ghost made of mortal stubbornness. I didn't go to Valerian. I didn't go to my father. I flew straight into the center of the black and gold fire in Caelum's hands. The impact was like a world being born. "Caelum," I whispered. My voice didn't come from a throat. It came from the bond I had supposedly broken. "Look at me, baby." Caelum's eyes snapped to mine. For a second, the God Prince was gone, and my son was back. He saw the white shimmer of my soul inside his own fire. "Papa," he choked out, the black and gold vortex beginning to wobble. "You are not the dark Caelum," I told him, wrapping my spirit around his struggling heart. "You are the dawn, and the dawn doesn't destroy. It reveals." I looked over at Valerian pinned to the throne. I reached out a phantom hand and touched the link that still existed between us, the love that even a snapped bond couldn't erase. "Valerian, give him the ground," I commanded. Valerian's eyes cleared. He saw me, a ghost of the man he loved, and he understood. He didn't send power this time. He sent peace. He opened his own core, not to kill, but to receive. Caelum took a deep breath. He didn't release the fire as an explosion. He channeled it through my ghostly form and into Valerian. The ritual flipped. The purple mist didn't dissolve the stones anymore. It was sucked into the ground, grounding the energy of the Star-Seers into the mountain itself. The High Alchemist shrieked as his violet fire was stripped away, leaving my father's broken body on the floor. The Sun-Eater warriors turned to dust. The crystalline ship in the sky shattered, its fragments falling like shooting stars over the horizon. Silence returned to the great hall. Caelum fell to his knees, exhausted. Valerian slumped on the throne, the spear in his shoulder dissolving into light. I stood between them, a flickering white outline of a man. I was fading. The energy of the reversal had used up the last of my ghostly essence. "Julian," Valerian whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "Don't go, please, not again." "I'm the bridge, Valerian," I said, my voice becoming a faint echo. "I'll always be here." Salvation was so close I could taste the mountain air, but I was on the wrong side of the door. But as my light flickered out, I saw Caelum stand up. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked at my father's body, then at Valerian, and then at the space where I was vanishing. "I'm not letting you go, Papa," Caelum said, his voice ringing with a power that was no longer a surge but a mastery. "I am the Daywalker. I walk where I want." He reached out and grabbed the empty air. And for the first time in history, a god decided to rewrite the laws of death. They say that the laws of life and death are written in stone, etched into the very foundation of the universe. But as I felt my ghostly form begin to dissolve into the cold gray mist of the void, I realized that my son didn't care for the laws of men or monsters. I saw Caelum standing in the center of the great hall, his hands outstretched, grabbing at the empty air where my spirit was flickering out. He looked magnificent. A young man forged in grief and sunfire, his gold eye burning with the authority of a creator. "You don't go where I don't follow, Papa." His voice boomed, vibrating through the rafters and the stones and the very atoms of my soul. He didn't just pull me back. He reached into the fading purple mist of the alchemist's ritual, reached into the ancient darkness of Valerian's core, and reached into the white-hot light of his own heart. He took those three threads: humanity, vampire immortality, and Daywalker light, and he began to weave. The sensation was agonizing and beautiful all at once. It felt like being knit back together by lightning. I felt my lungs reform, drawing in a sharp, gasping breath of mountain air. I felt my skin warm as the blood began to flow again. But it wasn't the old blood. It wasn't the blood of a spare meant to be spent. Caelum was rewriting the circuit. I felt the skipping, broken rhythm of my heart settle. The loose gear was gone. The bird with the broken wing was healed. My heart gave one massive, thunderous thud, a beat that echoed in sync with Valerian's soul, and then it settled into a perfect, eternal rhythm. I collapsed onto the floor, my hands solid, my chest heaving. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a fading bridge. I was whole. Valerian was at my side in an instant. He didn't say a word, his cold tears wetting my skin. He held me so tight I thought he might break my newly formed ribs, but I didn't care. I reached up, my fingers tangling in his silver hair, feeling the frantic vibration of his relief through the bond. "I have you," I whispered. "Valerian, I'm here." Beside us, the High Alchemist let out one final, pathetic shriek. The violet fire that had consumed my father's body was gone, leaving nothing but a frail, old man shivering on the cold marble. My father looked up at us, his eyes clear of the silver mist for the first time. He looked at me, then at the God Prince standing above him, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father feel something other than greed. He felt small. "Julian," he wheezed, reaching out a trembling human hand. I stood up, leaning on Valerian for support. I looked down at the man who had sold me, who had tried to harvest my son, who had turned my sister into a puppet. I should have felt hate. I should have wanted to swing the obsidian sword one last time. But as I looked at him, I realized that hate was a weight I didn't need to carry anymore. The bridge doesn't just ground power, it grounds the soul. "Go home, Father," I said, my voice echoing with a quiet authority that made the guards bow. "Take what's left of your dignity and tell the South that the war is over. Tell them that the North doesn't need a treaty anymore. We are the treaty." Caelum stepped forward, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. He didn't burn him. He gave him one last spark of warmth, enough to keep him alive for the journey home, but not enough to ever wield power again. My father slumped, his obsession finally broken by a mercy he didn't deserve. The sun began to rise over the Crimson Citadel, but it wasn't a normal sunrise. Caelum walked out onto the shattered balcony, looking out over the valley where the remains of the Star-Seers' ship lay like fallen glass. He raised his arms, and the gold eye in his head seemed to merge with the actual sun. "The long night is over," he announced to the world. A wave of pure golden light swept out from the citadel. It washed over the mountain peaks, the forests, and the borderlands. "He did it," Valerian whispered, his ruby eyes wide with awe. "He didn't just save you, Julian. He changed the sun. He made it kind." Caelum turned back to us, his face glowing with a tired but triumphant smile. He looked older now. The growth had settled him into the frame of a young man of 18 or 20, a prince truly ready for his throne. "The bridge is permanent now, Papa," Caelum said, walking to us and taking both our hands. "You aren't a finite resource anymore. I fused your mortality with Father's eternity. You are part of the dawn now. You'll be here to see me grow up. You'll be here for everything." I looked at the two of them, my monster and my miracle. The accidental groom had somehow become the anchor of a new world. A month has passed since the night the sky broke. The Southern Kingdom is recovering under the leadership of my sister, Elena. She's a true queen now, one who understands the value of a brother's love. We sent them carts of grain and medicine, not because of a pact, but because it was the right thing to do. The Eclipse Order has vanished into the history books, their alchemical greed replaced by the reality of the Daywalker. I am Julian. I am the king consort. I was the accidental groom who found a purpose, a son who found his strength, and a man who found a love that rewrote the stars. The long night is finally over. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the night is just as beautiful as the day.